New developments tonight in the war on business by President Obama's National Labor Relations Board. A little notice rule is putting pressure on companies to disclose their use of advisors in labor disputes. Coupled with the NLRB's case against Boeing, a strategy seems to emerge. Clear the way for unions to enter the workplace and make it very difficult for employers to do anything about it or move. Our next guests are both worried about these government moves. Dunhill Staffing President Neil Whitman says a South Carolina company will take a big hit if the NLRB gets its way with Boeing. And Phil Wilson is one of those union consultants and the author of The Next 52 Weeks, 1 year to transform your workplace. Phil, first to you, what is going on here with this ruling?
Well, there's actually an onslaught of rules. The persuader rule or the advice rule that you referred to has actually been published by the Department of Labor, but the National Labor Relations Board 1 day later published its own new rulemaking on trying to compress election periods down to possibly, Board Member Hayes suggested it would be down to 10 days, where currently you have about a month and a half. So they're hitting employers, both small and large employers. I mean, the Boeing case is, one of the biggest employers in the country. They're trying to hit from the very top to the very bottom, making it extremely difficult to do business in this country at a time when we should be focused on trying to create jobs. You know,
Neil, what I don't get here is this, and it seems like the administration's approach is to have this sort of thumb on the scale attitude toward unions, and we're still struggling with an unemployment rate that is so high. What do you make of what's going on with the rulemaking here at the NLRB?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right about unemployment. Our state had one of the highest unemployment rates in the country, and we get this wonderful announcement of one of the very largest industrial announcements ever coming into our state, where the plant's about ready to open, and the NLRB shows up and says, wait a minute, you've got to ship all these jobs back to Washington, D.C. if they have their way. I mean, the ripple effect of that on our economy here in Charleston would cost tens of thousands of jobs if you look at the ultimate, what happens when you open a plant this large. It has a lot of spin-off, but think about the dampening effect on other companies that are thinking about relocating from an area where they may have high labor costs. Yeah. They want to come to other areas. I mean, there's a lot more at stake here than just what's going on with Boeing.
Phil, let me just say one thing about the Boeing case. It's pretty flimsy because it essentially is saying that Boeing is, going to basically possibly cut jobs in Washington State in retaliation, and it's not cutting jobs in Washington State. In fact, it's adding jobs in the state. It's adding jobs at other plants.
They've added jobs.
And they're creating jobs at that South Carolina plant. They're just not union jobs. I think the union case against Boeing here is pretty weak. Am I wrong?
If you look at the arguments at the South Carolina plant.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the employees at that South Carolina plant actually were unionized at one point and decertified. They made a choice. They do not want to belong to the International Association of Machinists, and the machinists cannot take no for an answer. And you're right, Boeing has created jobs both in Washington State as well as trying to create jobs in South Carolina, and for the so-called crime of investing $1 billion in that state and creating thousands of jobs, they're now being told that they have to send that operation back to Washington.
Neil,
and a huge employer.
The case with the NLRB is basically just saying, look, we don't like that the CEO told a newspaper that, look, he's saying we have work stoppages in the state of Washington every 3 or 4 years. That's why the case was filed by the unions against Boeing. So who wins here? Does the union win in this case against Boeing, or does Boeing win?
Well, I think the other gentleman that just spoke, the union was here and they got voted out. So they've already had their chance at Charleston. We realize that the employers that here represent their employees well. Okay. So we don't need them to come in and help us out.
All right. Neil Whitman, small business owner, and Phil Wilson, who's a labor relations specialist. So good to be with you tonight, sirs. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Next up on deck, it's part of the holiday tradition, but our competitive eating contest getting out of hand. And there will be a debt limit agreement by the deadline. Text buy, sell, or hold to 369-249.